not everybody that's here was necessarily on the other panels, so we can do a quick, what is it, why does it matter? The dynamic media facilities, what is it, why does it matter? John, I'm going to start with you because you've done an entire long presentation over this, so do you want to see if you can do
just
it in 2
quickly,
seconds?
Who was in the main session earlier? All right, most people. Right, okay, so we won't repeat too much. But very briefly, Dynamic Media Facility, it was born 2.5 years ago from a initiative from a few major broadcasters wanting to work with vendors on what the next generation of media facility would look like. I think CBC, BBC, and a few of the others were really driving this. They'd learned a lot of lessons with their with their 2110 transformations, and they were looking at what they would be able to do in a greenfield move as a 5 to 10 year option. That led to a few vendors being invited to come in and share their roadmaps, and then that extended to, right, if we're going to do this, let's make it a broader industry conversation. Moving into MXL, so the layers that we spoke of earlier, and just to be really clear, the plumbing, the audio, video, metadata, that's what it does. That came around IBC 24 as an idea, went through various kickoffs. NAB 25 went into creation of the Tiger teams, I believe they were referred to as, and that led us through to 4 months after that being in a position of having an SDK ready to develop from. And there are a few people in the room who have lived and breathed that, haven't they, Andy? So Andy and Al from Zoom have been with on our mission at Grass Valley. We've been doing a lot of integration there. So I think they can really speak to how fast MXL came to being an SDK they could work from through to working with ourselves, Riedel, TVU, Appear, some of the others by IBC. So certainly well under a year, we went from concept to sharing pictures and audio, which is fundamentally what it's all about. From NVIDIA. There you go. Sorry, I'm trying to remember. Last time I did this, I had 29 slides, and I'm trying to remember. And I think one of the and the Linux Foundation as well, which keeps us all honest and doing things the way it should be done. But I think there it's that really leans into the openness of this, and I think as vendors, we've never really seen anything like this. We've done a lot of interops, we've sat in rooms, made things work before, but never at the speed and the open collaboration that we're now seeing with MXL. If anybody wants to, hopefully that's a fair agreement with everybody that's a vendor in the room.
Yeah, I'm curious how many vendors versus end users are in the room.
Vendors, raise your hand. All right. End users. All right.
Audience participation. Exactly. But
for those of you that don't know, Thomas is with AWS.
I have a question. How we figured that. When can we expect generally available products with the MXL? Good question.
That is a good question. I'm not at liberty to say yet. Not this year, and I'll just leave it at that.
Sooner. Yes. So from a Grass Valley perspective, in terms of where we're at, I think we are down the line with our Zoom integration pieces. We're working on things. We've shown that as part of our general demonstrations at IBC. We're going into ISE next week, so Andy and I are following each other around the world. And then by NAB, we'll have some more announcements.
And just to clarify on that, we do have MXL working, and we all showed that when we were at IBC. Then it also comes down to market analysis and seeing exactly what the right fit is and what the proper pieces are, as opposed to just saying, hey, we're doing it, and then changing it another year down the road. So we want to make sure what we're doing, it's going to live for a while.
Yeah.
So can you clarify the difference between MXL, which is doing something fundamentally different, from something like MXF, which is a wrapper talking about concepts and allowing us to interchange concept around?
I'm not 100% familiar with MXF.
The media exchange formats what came out 10
Okay, so basically we're not exchanging anything. We're basically, what MXL is doing is putting it into memory and then allowing other vendors to come into, let's say, what I put in or Riedel put into memory, allowing somebody else to access that media while it's still in memory, as opposed to taking it out and transferring it to somebody else.
And it's not a wrapper. You're not wrapping something and then transporting it. You're just allowing access to it. And what's beautiful is all these different vendors can access that same media. And it really removes a problem of having to transfers back, going back out, going back in, which has been a huge problem as we're integrating different people's products. You're creating one solution, but as we're taking best in breed products, we've had to go out of a product, back into a product, out of a product, back into a product. Yeah, that really creates a lot of inefficiencies for us. So what they're creating really is the holy grail of avoiding that and being able to just keep the media where it is, and everybody can do what they need to do to that media without having to move that media. Did I capture it okay, guys?
Definitely. And I'll throw something or cue something up to Thomas over here. What it also does is, as we move things into public cloud infrastructure, it makes the ability for them to apply it to their computes and their GPUs so much more efficient. Whereas, we might have to put one vendor's software into a virtual machine here, another one in a virtual machine, another one in a physical machine over there, and then transfer it in and out between those, can now all be in the same virtual machine, all running in that same compute. Did I get that right there?
Yes.
I would think there would have to be a rather sophisticated ability to block stuff out, right? If someone is accessing the possibly at the same time, there would be some planning. This will be accessing
Yeah, and I think
Yeah,
just
go.
cheers, Rick. Yeah, on that, you're absolutely right. One of the key benefits is we're still taking the grain mindset, but effectively the way the memory sharing works is it's effectively a virtual file system. So you can go all the way down to creating a file structure with permissions bases that look after that single grain. So that could be this production type, or it could be this user configuration, and effectively you're working on a almost virtual file permission system. So you can really drill down into that. So I mean, they're the things that we're getting to explore now as we take it from being effectively technology demonstrations into engaging with end users and how their ideas will start to work about how they will want the security and permissions to and the slicing of that. Because obviously, if you look at something like a managed service provider who may have one system with multiple clients, is very different to a broadcaster with multiple users doing news versus sports, for example. So we're going to really start to see some of the benefits of that low granularity security coming through, which you just can't do in the same way with other technologies.
Yes, and so when you look at the full DMF architecture, the full stack, right now we're at the MXL layer, which is basically just the center thing that makes the rest happen. And the rest needs to happen. So I don't know if you were in the other meeting and we had a slide up that showed the pyramid or the stack. There were the horizontal layers and there were the vertical layers. The vertical layers are where you set that orchestration, you set your workflow, and then it has to be monitored and it has to be secure, and all those other pieces still need to come in intact for that. And that's going to be a very, very important portion of this.
I wanted to ask a little bit more on that point. So one of the things that's so beautiful about MXL as a protocol, right, is that Unix is acting as the management layer. The file system is the management. It doesn't require additional software to do that. But I'm curious, as we get into orchestration, those higher level platforms, which are still the vendor specific protocols around stream discovery, stream publication, what are some of your guiding principles that will parallel what was done with MXL when the orchestration is streamed.
One thing is knowing how these things will all behave on that node or that compute. Knowing when, how much headroom that you have in there, and as things scale, this is going to be a major thing. Knowing how much we can put into one node. There are other aspects within DMF. I think you mentioned Rocky and where in RDMA, which is basically remote direct memory access, so that you can actually access it from one node to another. And what we actually showed was transferring at IBC, taking it from one memory in one node and moving it over to another node. But these other aspects are going to have to come in so that we can actually protect it and not go into production and then realize, oh, this thing scaled up and now it really needs to be moved to multiple nodes. So.
And remember, that is the beauty of this. We're just starting. And these guys have gotten so far in such a short amount of time. But what I'm most excited about is what's to come. It's going to be version 2. It's going to be the iteration. It's going to be when they get to RDMA and they can do multiple nodes. That's when it's going to get really interesting.
Yeah, and I think, Andy, to your point, I think really it starts to, you need to be really clear on the separation between DMF and MXL. So from a pure technology point of view, we can share audio, video, metadata, or metadata. I think came in V1. It's certainly on the roadmap. That's completely separated to the point we have with the orchestration and the understanding. And effectively, I hate to use this phrase because I'll probably get told off, but timeline management, it is about that understanding of capacity between links. We already have the support with RDMA for using internode as well as intranode. So the intranode is how do we place in memory once all applications in a single appliance are using it from the location, whether it's on RAM, it's on GPU memory, etc. It stays where it is. When we move to an intermodel, which is where RDMA kicks in, and we've got a stack, so similar to we use this already as with our grid product, but the way that then shares those streams between those products, that's the inter, and that's where the RDMA technology management comes in. And this is what we were seeing, to my point in the last session, where we're using industry standard technologies to piggyback on. And that's where that comes in. But we have to take that MXL conversation and in some ways remove it to the broader DMF, and it's where JT DMF comes in. And the threads, and I always get it wrong, paths, threads, the 4 that you've got in terms of the functions for the task force, the work groups, that really starts to be important to how is orchestration going to work multi-vendor, how is billing going to work multi-vendor, etc., as opposed to how MXL moves audio and pictures around. We might want to speak to that, Cindy.
Yeah, so the 4 work groups that Jonathan's talking about, they're being formed right now, and one is the business level that Claudia and I were talking about. So because this is such a business level change, there's a lot to address in terms of enabling DMF from that point of view, from a business point of view. There's also end-to-end synchronization. That's one of the other working groups. And we have Flow, Discovery, and Connect. And there's a third one that, there's one in the middle there, and I'll remember it in a minute. So those are the ones that are available from a technical point of view. So not only are we looking at the technical pieces, but also the business pieces in terms of the working groups.
Near and dear to my heart, the business side.
Right.
I was going to say something about, as an end user, thinking about what is our infrastructure today and what does this bring. We are 2110 facilities, and we have multiple offices that are either in a close geo. We have a building in New York where we are having spine leaf with leaves littered all over the facility to be able to have one media fabric. DMF allows you to kind of eliminate that network stack that you get distributed, and you can actually have processing nodes that are actually distributed through whether it's grid or whatever, that becomes being able to share that media between all of those nodes in a very similar way without having to have gateways to bring in, do I say legacy first here? Legacy technology into the environment, but it's the that's where I see some of the benefits. Now we're distributing and processing and not just ways of getting it into.
Yeah, and I think that talks to, we touched on it in the last session about when and where to use different technologies. So what we're looking at with MXL is effectively an in-rack, in-facility mindset. And then we're still going to go out. So, you go out to TRO7 you for JPEG for your tie lining. DMF is that level above. So how are you going to orchestrate that if you've got multiple data centers, and in each data center, whether or not they're private or it's a public environment, each one of those clusters of processing is now much more efficient because we're not using NDI 2110 SDI loopbacks around the devices in one rack, but we've gone to MXL, RDMA in rack solution. We're still going to need to bridge those physically different locations using other technologies. We're still going to need to have an edge that allows you to connect into a baseband infrastructure in facility one and a 2110 in another, and bring NDI in from a third. So that mix is where we're really talking about how DMF is an overarching conversation, and MXL really is about fundamentally how do we make compute work as efficiently as possible by not forcing it to work the way that the broadcast industry has worked, which is massively efficient by encoding, decoding, and packetizing when you don't need to. That's what MXL really is about. Let computers be good at what they're doing. And DMF is that high level.
Water versus plumbing. I think one of the most confusing topics in the industry is orchestration, the misuse, or not misintended, but the misuse of the phrase orchestration. So let's drill down here a little bit in terms of what is orchestration as a function, what is orchestration as a product, and how will orchestration be managed in the industry in light of DMF? Are there companies like Evertz who are going to do orchestration products that manage all the others? Is each company going to have an orchestration component or plug-in? How are we going to wrangle it?
Wow. So you're right there as you say Evertz, as you say certain things. I think you're talking about broadcast orchestration the way you're saying it. Cindy.
I was just going to say, I hope you join the compute resources and the flow discovery and connection, one or both of those JTDMF groups, because we need you on that to make it happen. In fact, anybody here, end customer, manufacturer, integrator who's got something to bring to the table, I hope you join in.
We really could have done with that slide. But yeah, to your point, just finish on that one. You're absolutely right. UI separated from broadcast, what we would have traditionally known as the broadcast management layer versus what we would have known from a true orchestration point of view, is split out, and it, to be from a personal point of view, is really what JTDMF has got its work cut out for, because we don't have the standardization to do that. We don't have the protocols that we had in the broadcast world to say you can buy a broadcast management solution from one vendor and it will go and work over our well-loved traditional protocols like SWP and everything will talk. That's exactly what the JTDMF has got to go away and deal with, because right now, as a vendor, we can provide a DMF-esque solution. Everything that was on that slide earlier on, you can buy from Grass Valley, and we can make it work with our partner vendors on an MXL point of view. But you are buying all of those top layers from us. The DMF project is about how do you democratize that, for want of a popular term, and make that available to say, here are the standards, the protocols, the working understanding of how that's going to run, how are you going to bill it, how are you going to control it. And like I said, the difference between technical orchestration and the business orchestration are really going to need to be well defined in the coming years.
And the control, the orchestration, the observability, the monitoring, everything else, you can't overlook that, and you can't add that later, and you can't say, well, let's not worry about that now. This detail layer that we're working on now is very important, but you can't have a DMF,
Yes.
You can't have the facility until we figure out the control, the orchestration, and everything else, and the monitoring, as you knew when you asked the question. That's critical.
It's the easiest analogy right now today is Apple versus Android. It's an OS platform choice. So we can do this. You can buy other apps from other people, but right now you'll come to us or one of the other vendors and choose to be an Apple-based platform, or an Android, a Grass Valley, or a Riedel, who have built their orchestration levels at the highest level. 5 years from now, the question is, how many layers will you have to pick in that bundle? It might be that you have to take 3 or 4 layers, which is where we are today, but in 5 years' time, you might be able to select each individual layer based on how long how well the DMF runs. Okay.
Well, so that kind of plays into my question of, for MXL to ideally work its best, everyone's got to be playing at the same level and be willing to share as much information openly as possible. What, if anything, would manufacturers have to, be it for a logistical or engineering reason, remove from memory that wouldn't be interoperable, that they wouldn't be able to give other vendors access to? Are there lines in the sand, or is it really coming through? Because you can't build an SDK to give all of your manufacturing secrets to another.
This is the whole point. Go on, Rick.
Early on, well, only 2 years ago. It's amazing how things, how fast things are going. I think I said this before. Everybody has pretty much been doing in a silo MXL, and I think we actually went and you proposed yours, we proposed ours, and then everybody said no. It has to be a group effort or no effort at all, and that's where we're starting from, as opposed to taking somebody that's been doing something and going, hey, why don't you come onto my platform, and my platform will be the standard. That's not the way we're doing it.
Yeah, there was some contribution code made from each of the vendors, so from the lessons we'd learned. So some of us were further down the line than others, but some of the other vendors were specific in streaming, or they were audio specialists, etc. So everybody had their own preferences about how that should run. But again, with it being Linux Foundation led, if you're in it, you have to follow the rules and contribute back. So everybody is contributing to and taking from the same SDK, and all the lessons that are learned are all put back in. So this is where what we've learned between V0 and the launch of V1 would be, right, this worked, this didn't. We all agree, great, we're going to all build our next MXL gateway based on this version of the SDK. So this is the big difference between how, for example, 2110 interops were done, where there's a standard written and an interpretation of what that means. Then everybody has to be in a room going, oh, I read that line this way and you read that line the other way.
Shall or must.
Yeah. Whereas this time...
Very big, yeah. Shall and should.
Good. Whereas this time, everybody used the same SDK. It's the same code. So there is none of that ambiguity. And if there is this doesn't work, everybody feeds back into the open source project and it gets fixed in the next release.
Yeah, 2 questions. Because of interoperability, I guess, right? Does that mean it's going to be specifically the data structure that everybody will buy to? So that's question 1. The other one, because of the same interoperability amongst multiple vendors, security comes to mind. And if you actually don't put it on top as well, it's probably not going to be sufficient. Are you looking into like API
That is beyond my technical skill. But if Rick hasn't got an answer, Andy.
Yeah, so the way we handle it on our side is we do the disclosure. So imagine meeting participants being sent out to the MXL protocol, being picked up by a switcher or something like that. We have a disclosure flow on our side that meets our regulatory obligations to say that the media is being shared with third parties, and we have mechanisms as a vendor that allow us to do the notification. But I think to your point, one of the things that we'll have to see how it's addressed is that today, right, there's a common form basically that you're submitting the data into in order for it to be discoverable through the protocol. But it's raw data, essentially. It's raw frames that are being shared through memory. And what protection can be put on top of that to prevent things like memory, access vulnerabilities from giving you audio content from a protected meeting to third parties who were not intended to be in that circle of trust. Those will be some of the questions that we're asking as well about the evolution of the protocol.
Club that's
mentioned
being defined.
EDPF.
Yeah.
So the good news is there's no EDPF. It's all between hosts. We'll use Lyth fabric. Have you heard of that before? It's an abstraction which can run over any type of fabric, whether it's RDNA or Ethernet on-prem, whether it's IBM Blue Gene supercomputers, whether it's AWS Elastic Fabric Adapter. It's an OS bypass RDNA, remote direct memory access between network interface cards. That's why we use the high performance computer business and also to train, exchange weights between AI training. Yeah, it's a definite OS bypass, lower, it's network interface cards, moving stuff from one memory location to another. Well, I mean, if you do it wrong, you screw up anything.
No,
But yes, if you,
purposely put something bad in there for people?
the processes should have their security levels where they can give permission to memory to be written to, and if they don't give that permission, then the memory can't be written to. So
These are stops. Media is even better than concepts. I think they're quite a ways away.
But I think
applied 2110 is on pizza because
yeah, I mean the people who are working on the actual developers are very aware of the need for a high level of security. And the good news is the POSIX file system gives us a huge amount of fine-grained security. Read, write for each user group, etc.
What's nice about it is that there's, the idea of multiple processes co-located on similar hardware is like a well-explored area in cloud compute. So it's kind of funny. We've been talking to some customers about the broadcast engineers catching up to the cloud revolution that took place over the last 20, 30 years. These security mechanisms have been well-defined to support the public cloud. And because MXL and DMF are building on that same foundation, we're inheriting a lot of those security practices that were developed to allow multiple instantiations of software on the same physical hardware.
Standing on the shoulder of giants, I think, is one of Vincent and Francois' favourite sayings around this. And that goes back to those lower three levels on the slide earlier. It's not reinventing the wheel when these things exist in much larger industries than ours.
I can see the benefits of efficiency that you're going for and the inefficiencies of transferring from one thing to another. The advantage I see of having things separated and transferring is reliability. That if you don't have a problem with MXL of an all your eggs in one basket issue, that memory corrupted, you haven't just lost one thing, you've lost multiple things.
I think that's going to come down to best practice design as well. So don't put cameras 1 through 20 in box 1. We're going to have lots of those, and they're no different to what we do with current architecture designs. Even in 2110, we have to consider blocking networks, etc., and where you're processing those individual streams. So, and redundancy. And I think, you don't have to build one cluster with 10 boxes in. You can build 2 clusters with 5 and distribute across that. So a lot of what we do already for redundancy and resilience will carry through. We just need to be aware of the restrictions.
So it looks like we're at time. This is a great conversation, I know, but we're waiting on
Do you have notes?
Thank you.